Hello there. This is a video to draw attention to some government legislation entitled Protection from Harassment Act 1997, and this is basically outlining some circumstances where a accusation of harassment is unfounded, baseless and illegal, quite simply because it does not conform to government legislation. And the reason for that lies, if we just take a quick look here briefly, click on protection from harassment. I'll put the link in the description. We find that all the predicted groundwork, the normal explanations for harassment are in the first couple of paragraphs here, which is what we'd expect to find. A person must not pursue a course of conduct which A, amounts to harassment of another, B, he knows ought to know amounts to harassment of the other. 1A, a person must not pursue a course of conduct which involves harassment of two or more persons, B, which he knows or ought to know involves harassment of those persons, or C, by which he intends to persuade any person, 1, not to do something that he is entitled or required to do, 2, to do something that he is not under any obligation to do. That's all fairly straightforward, but what a lot of people don't know is there is a further paragraph or clause in this legislation which does very clearly cite 3 examples by which an allegation of harassment is not justified. In other words, illegal and quite clearly of no legal proper standing. And that particular instance is very clearly defined here in this clause 3, which says subsection 1, the pieces I've just read out to you, does not, I repeat, not apply to a course of conduct if the person who pursued it shows A, that it was pursued for the purpose of preventing or detecting crime. So if you have collected large amounts of evidence on a crime that you have witnessed, then of course that certainly don't or shouldn't constitute harassment. And B, that it was pursued under any enactment or rule to comply with any condition or requirement imposed by any person under any enactment, to suggest that if you have been collecting evidence on a crime that is very clearly stated to be a crime in the rule book, in the statute book, then there is absolutely no grounds, certainly or very as according to this, to levy a charge of harassment. And C goes on to further explain that in the particular circumstances the pursuit of the course of conduct was reasonable. In other words, I suppose if you can prove that A and B are true and that you are a reasonable citizen collecting evidence of serious crimes, and there is nothing unreasonable about your conduct, then A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, you have perfect entitlement to turn around to whoever it is, whether it be a person or the police or a court, and tell them that a charge of harassment is completely illegal, unjustified, and potentially amounts to a very serious or a charge of harassment in itself, of course, because if people are raising false, baseless charges of harassment on people who are quite clearly simply gathering evidence on heinous crimes, then that very clearly constitutes harassment in itself, and a potentially very serious crime in itself. Once we look at other sides of the law, for example, reporting a crime that we see here, of course, very interestingly says if you witness a crime, you have a vital role to play in bringing the criminals to justice. So, in other words, to suggest, yes, everybody has a duty to report crime, but one thing I notice here is that it does not make a distinction between what I call corporate crime, mafia-style crime, and low-level Joe Blogg street crime. And this becomes more apparent as we read on. If you witness a crime, you have a vital role to play in bringing the criminals to justice. You may well be feeling upset and have doubts about reporting what you have seen. Well, that's interesting what they've said there, actually. You may well be feeling upset. I mean, let's say, for example, you've spotted some serious corporate crime going on at a high level, Epstein-style crime, that may even involve, murders, etc. Well, you might be feeling upset and have doubts about reporting what you have seen, like paedophiles, etc. There is no legal obligation to contact the police, but the information you give could bring a criminal to justice, it says here, which is starting to get a bit suspicious. If there's no legal obligation to contact the police in instances of very serious crime, then that should, send alarm bells ringing in some areas. Just reading on, reporting the crime to the police could prevent further crimes being committed and protect others from becoming victims. Well, fairly obviously. But yes, I mean, no legal obligation to contact the police. I mean, if somebody is literally brutally murdered in front of us, we have no legal obligation to call the police, which I find quite astonishing. And does kind of suggest that in some instances, corporate crime or should be excused. And that then, raises further questions. Well, what's going on here? Because it seems that there is a clear instance here of perverting the course of justice. If police are levying false, baseless charges of harassment on people, what are they trying to do? Well, pervert the course of justice. I mean, seems fairly clear. This is perverting, which does an act or series of acts which have a tendency to pervert, which is or are intended to pervert the course of public justice, which is exactly what the police are doing, in these particular sort of circumstances. And what does that amount to? Well, abuse of process, of course, which could also be deemed entrapment, abuse of executive power, both of those examples. And in my particular example, I don't know how much time we've got in my particular story, I'd just like to show you just a bit of background before we go. This is the charity scam that I was investigating for the best part of 25 years. So I developed a nasty sinus cancer problem. This is in 1995, and was sent on a mission to investigate cures, interrogate cures. This is for the best part of 25 years to the present day. And during this time, I've found the victim of all kinds of physical assaults, in 2 murder attempts, in this bid to basically just interrogate this scam and investigate all the issues going on around it. And the upshot of that, of course, was unfortunately, yes, I did suffer this awful murder attempt. This was in 2012. This is literally just investigating cures, and it's no coincidence, I don't think at all, that I suffered such a brutal attack in light of the gravity of the scam that I was investigating. Now, yes, some of the assailants here, this is the chap that attacked me. I've crossed out the names here. I've been told by the police, you see, that this amounts to harassment, which is the whole thing here. I've got to cross out the names, because if I give the names, that amounts to harassment, although these people are all guilty of heinous crimes that have not been investigated, by the police. In other words, these people have not received a phone call or any effort to look into the crimes and offences that they have committed. And the mere fact that I have collected evidence on them and published it apparently constitutes harassment, which, as I say, is just a ridiculous allegation right from the